Hey, it's Millie, and welcome to the Generalist World podcast. This is a show where I interview people from the Generalist World community, and we talk things like the future of work, careers, predictions, their hot takes, and really understand what their squealy careers have looked like. So if you're a generalist who feels like they're living in a specialized world, this is the podcast for you. Eva, welcome. If people are listening to this, it means that this experiment worked and we learned something from it. So just for background, in case this does get published out into the world, Eva reached out a couple of days ago on the Generalist World community because I am trying to create this challenge, this learning resource for folks. And Eva reached out and was like, hey, I've been doing this for 8 or 9 years. This is kind of like my bread and butter. Can I help and support? And I was like, actually, I could really do with some help and support. And so we lined up this call. And then I had a really weird idea yesterday. And that was like, why don't we record the call and maybe we'll publish it and other people can learn. So I think if you're listening to this and if you are curious about learning design, about content, about programming, this is definitely going to be an episode that you want to set aside some time to listen to. But Eva, I wonder if we could just start. Could you tell me a little about yourself and a little bit about the work that you do?
So really nice to see you. And hi, everybody who's listening, if you're listening. So like Camille said, for the past 8 years, I've been working in the online educational world, designing online courses. It was specifically for a coaching company, and we did exclusively online large cohort educational courses for professional coaches. And partially my role was to manage those courses. So I worked as a program manager for 4 years. And then for the other 4, I went deep into the design. So I worked with the experts to help them. I like to say I helped them extract their expertise and then translate it into a learning experience that will be useful and practical for people. Because I think when adults sign up for a learning course, they want something practical. They want something that they can use in their either day-to-day life, personally or professionally. I don't think many adults today learn, for learning's sake, because we're just so busy. And so, yeah, that's kind of where I am today and why we're here.
Amazing, because where I'm at from my side, so I am the founder who is hoping that you can extract this knowledge and turn it into something usable, because I have been wanting for a really long time to be able to have some kind of product which acted as like a bridge between all of the free stuff we do and then the community, which is like a higher ticket item for folks. And I'm like, okay, what is something that people always come and ask me? What is the thing that is the thread, the pattern that I see across so many people in our audience? And it's this idea of you have to niche down. You have to pick one thing, talk about one thing. You have to be only known for one very narrow thing, where I have found the most success in being known for a lot of things, from everything from writing to creating to living on an island to poetry to making yogurt and avocados. If it's interesting, I'll post about it. And so I've kind of ironically made my niche about not having a niche, right? And my perspective is that this is a teachable thing, and that you can, by developing a really strong point of view and perspective on the world, it's actually more powerful than having a niche, because having a point of view is what people know you for. It's what people will recommend you. It's why people will trust you. And so my goal is to create this kind of challenge where people will go from not being known, not knowing how to publish, feeling like that cringe and I don't know, it's a blank page problem, to 21 days later having this confidence, having this point of view, having actually published, ripping off that Band-Aid and having a repeatable published thing that they can kind of point to, and also making friends along the way, which is what we always like to do at GW. So Eva, where would you start?
Yeah. Okay. So just one thing I want to say, and that is that one of the reasons why I fell in love with the GW world was because of your post on LinkedIn and because of everything what you said. because you are posting about who you are as a person. And I think, my LinkedIn feed has become so much more interesting because of that. And I say to people, LinkedIn is not, ugh, because everybody has that feeling of, LinkedIn, it's so business oriented, it's so boring. Everybody just posts about conferences and stuff. And I'm like, well, that's not really true for my LinkedIn feed because I have Millie and other people in the generalist world. So if we can spread that throughout, I think everybody's LinkedIn feeds will become more interesting and more personable. So the question that came to mind as I was listening to you is, and obviously this is a beta, right? We're going to run a beta because you've never done this. So, let's treat it as such and set some hypothesis of like, is 21 days enough to create a transformation that you want to create? Like that would be my first question. What do you think? What's your experience? How long did it take you?
Oh, fantastic question. I think it took me years, if I'm honest, to find that voice. And the caveat with that is I really didn't feel like I felt like a lone wolf in that process. I felt like I was one of the very few on LinkedIn who was going against the grain and having this point of view over a niche. And so I think if I were to do that with, say, 100 others or 200 others who were also doing it, I think that would massively have accelerated my process and my confidence. And can it happen in 21 days? I think a lot can happen in 21 days. I'm not expecting someone to come out of this the other end of like, a completely different person, but then also we don't know that
Yeah.
until we start. So I think I would feel confident in taking the punt that 21 days could make a marked transformation for someone.
Yeah, like a kickstart. Okay, so we talked a little bit about kind of how this could be structured. And I know I saw on the website that you put out, it's a lot about doing, and I absolutely agree. You can read about it all you want, but you need to go out and do it. But what is it like? What's the bit that somebody needs to know or understand, or what's the teach bit? Let's say, what would you need to teach someone before they can actually go out and do it themselves? Because if let's say I haven't posted anything ever because I'm too scared. And, how do you see that part? Like, do I start posting on day one, or do you need to teach me something before I start posting? How would that work?
I think there needs to be the pre-work. I like to think of it, I have this framework that I use, which is known, own, tone, and it's spending some time getting to know yourself. I think this is where the best content comes from, is like when you're really honest with yourself. And so known is like making kind of like a tree of what are the things I want to be known for? Maybe it's learning design, maybe it's content, maybe it's living on this island, maybe it's growing food and fermenting it. It's like, what is this picture that I want the internet to know me for? And importantly, what don't I want them to know me for? For example, I don't speak about my relationship with my husband. Like that's a sacred part of my life that doesn't need to be known. So seeing what those things are that you want to be known for. And then there is the own, which is, I think, really the crux of your point of view. So when someone thinks of Millie, they say, oh, she is someone who believes that generalists have enormous value in the world and that work shouldn't be a miserable thing that you have to do for 40 years and get no joy from it, and that you can rebel against this like career ladder. There are these kind of, if someone was speaking about you in a bar or a cafe and they were like, so who is Millie? What does she do? It's those things that people would talk about you in a room that you're not in. That's what you're known for. And then the tone is, I think, the thing that comes from the doing. So for a lot of my posts, I think if you looked at it blind, you could almost tell that it was me because you become so familiar with my voice and how I write. And it's worth thinking about that at the beginning when you're getting started in this journey to be like, okay, what is that? How do I want to make people feel when they see or read my post? Is it inspired? Is it educated? Is it taken care of? Is it safe? Like what is that tone? And then you can kind of work backwards from there to like back in to creating that tone.
Yeah, so sounds like there would be a couple of exercises that we could pull from that, because what they would have to do is, I don't know, do you have a visual in mind? Like the tree, what you said, own.
Known, own, tone.
Yeah, known, own, tone. So I see this as like an exercise where they map out, maybe go out and ask others, the own part. What do you think I'm good
Hmm.
at? But I sometimes think it's helpful for people to get that other perspective. You know how it is like, I recently went through that process. It's very meta when you need to turn yourself into a product almost, and or your services.
Mm.
It's just like it's difficult for us ourselves to see us how someone else sees us. So, like, how do you see that as like how would you, teach someone? Would it be three exercises that you give them?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind, because my brain just works in community. So I always come back to like, what's the peer-to-peer cool thing here? And I wonder if it's like, you know, part of this, because I'd quite like to do a live kickoff where we could bring people together. And I'm wondering if, say, the second half of that could be like going into breakout groups and you're maybe in a group of four and you've got, I don't know, a couple of minutes just to word vomit all of these things that you want to be known for. And I think often people think they have to go digging and search for this thing, but it's often the obvious thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I've learned. And so when I am talking to you about the things that light me up, the things where I get most of my energy from, it's actually really obvious. My eyes light up, I become a bit more animated. And sometimes being in a small group or in a pair, they can reflect that back to you. So, and maybe to cater to different learning styles, we could give the exercise in advance so people can have a think about it and can go through it if they like. And then the practice of the reflection and connecting with other people who are on in the same space could happen on like a live kind of
Yeah,
workshop.
yeah, love it. Okay, so you just said something that we have not discussed, which is there would be a live component to this. This is how you see it, right?
I think like the beginning and potentially the end, I would love to have a live component. I'm just very conscious that our audience is very global
Mm-hmm.
and time zones can be a nightmare. So I don't want it to be like and I don't want this to be a burden in someone's life. I want it to be an addition. So anything that we do live, I want to be really thoughtful that it's like a real value add to the whole experience.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I think it's a great idea to start with something live because of the community, because also people get to experience you. They get to ask
Hmm.
questions on the spot. It's more personal. And I think it just adds more value than the email series that we'd be doing afterwards. So just, spitballing, like this could go in the 21-day thing, or it could sit separately and then the 21 days are actually like, do it, do it, do it.
Hmm. True. I'm not sure yet. Could be either.
Yeah. We could also, depends on when we start. I
Because
quite like 21 it's a nice number. And I think the repetition gives the value on, I don't know what the framework is, like how long it takes you to form a habit. I'm not sure if it's like 40 days or something, but we could play around with that. I do think there's value in keeping the 21 days for like just, repeat, 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 repeat. And maybe start with the live thing.
yeah. So like live and then 21 days. And the
Yeah.
21 days where I've got that from is I think like that's 3 weeks, right? So it would be 3 weeks of your life. I think that feels like a big enough chunk that you can see that there's going to be some kind of change, but not so much of a commitment that you're like, well, that's impossible. I'm too busy. I don't have 21
Yeah.
days. And I was also thinking for the structure, because most of us would be posting from a professional-ish lens. So I'm thinking if it was like Monday to Friday is the doing the public posting, and then the weekends could be like more of a reflection and an inner. So it's not like, I mean, I don't post 7 days a week. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't expect someone else to either. I think like that 4 to 5 is absolutely like amazing. If you're hitting that, like you will improve and your confidence 100% will improve if you are posting 4 to 5 times a week for 3 weeks. It just will.
Yeah, yeah, 100%, especially if you're doing it with a group of people and you're supporting each other in that process. Let me just pull up some of the questions that I sent you. Okay, so here's an important one because it specifically impacts the design piece. But like, do you see the ask that we have for them escalating and like getting more difficult and challenging as we go through the 21-day arc? Or is it like a more consistent, steady beat. And maybe you don't know.
What have you seen? Or from your experience, what's been effective?
So I always like to say it depends on the content. I know it's not a popular answer, but I like to fit the format to the content, not the other way around, just because I think it makes most sense. So
Mm.
it, and that's why I asked you that question, what are the outcomes that you want
Hmm.
them to have? And you said to have a very clear, confident, embodied point of view, to have new language around what they're great at, and to make new friends, right? So if we look at that, do we need to make like scaffold things and make them more challenging as we go, or can we, just design a consistent beat and still that like I like to have those three things, or however many we set out as our learning outcomes, is like a guiding north star, like you always have that in front of you,
Mm.
and then everything you build, you kind of check, okay, does this align with that? Does it lead them to that? So when you think about it in that frame, what would you say?
I actually would lean at first, before you clarified, I would have said consistent, but I think I'm actually leaning toward the ramping up. And the reason being, a lot of folks have not posted. I've had hundreds of replies to so when someone joins the wait list, I ask them, I'm like, why are you here? Why did you sign up? Why did you join? And I've had hundreds, and I've shared some of those responses with you. And a lot of people are they have all the knowledge, they have all the expertise, they have all the stories, and they have never, ever shared it. I'm asking a lot, right?
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
conscious that this is a big step and a big leap for people. And so I think it's unreasonable to think that in week one, they're going to be like, have this confidence. And so maybe it is just like week one is this tiny step. Like you're going to push publish, and then you're going to walk away, and you're going to be like, I did it. And then week two, you're building your confidence. Week three, you're really like owning that point of view.
Yeah, yeah, I like that. And it almost sounds like we could potentially theme the weeks in
Mm.
some way, like group what you'll be teaching and what they'll be doing each week, so that it's, I don't know, week one, and I think I wrote that to you, make it super like ridiculously easy. That's always a rule. Like
Yeah.
when someone's starting with something, just make it the obstacle so easy. I've heard an example, like if you want to start running, just on day one, just put your shoes on and go run for 1 minute,
Mm.
something like that.
Love that.
So super easy. And then in week two, we could up the antes a little bit, and so maybe week one could be known, and I'm totally making this up, so we don't have to get stuck on this, but because it's like those are that's your, not a like framework. I don't know. It sounds like it's your model or something. So potentially we could play around with that.
Love that. Oh, and that makes sense. Yeah, because known own tone almost follows the deeper you go, the
Yeah.
more like you don't know your tone until you've like got a bit more comfortable with what you
Yeah.
know and what you want to own.
Yeah, and like, so you still keep posting every day. It's not that you only start posting in week three when you have the previous two, but it's like you're sharpening your tone by posting about what you're known
Yes.
for, then what you own, and then like, okay, this is my tone. Ah, this
I love
feels
it.
good.
Yes. Yes.
Nice.
This is great.
Nice. Okay. So, yeah, one of my questions was, and this might be too technical or logistical, but did you have in mind to build some kind of a resource base, or something where anything and everything that we give them lives, and it could be just a simple Notion page.
Yeah, that makes total sense, right? Especially because it's going to be quite async,
Yeah.
and that's such a no-brainer. Like, why would we not?
Yeah, I think so too. Like, especially if there's going to be a live recording, then the replay could live there, and almost like a
Yeah.
summary of each week. Because sometimes it's messy
Yes.
if you need to go through your emails to
Yes.
remind yourself of everything. So I just feel like it's simple, easy. You love Notion. I love Notion. People love it too. So why would we
Yeah.
not use it? Okay, let me just repeat the structure back loosely. We start with the live workshop, whatever it is, 1 hour, 2 hours, where you kind of welcome everybody. We'll design what exactly you'll teach them there, but the point is for them to start meeting each other. I think that's also a great opportunity for them to meet live, have some small group
Yeah.
discussions, start thinking about what they're known for, and then we kind of set the stage and we kick the whole thing off. Then we have known, own, tone for the following 3 weeks. And then every day you send them an email, right? There's an email that lands in their inbox. Now, what I was thinking, and you tell me if that's also aligned with what where you want to go, is to potentially structure each of these emails as like, you explain why something is important. So the teach bit would be, this is how I think about something. This is why I think something is important when you think about how to be known for something, for example. Here's a good example of that, or here's how I did it. So that would be the show bit. And then do would be a specific prompt of, okay, now you go and do that, post it.
Amazing.
And I feel like that would be something that we could replicate on a daily basis. And then it's always, because I do feel a little bit of teach is needed for people to just understand why and how things connect together. And we could play around with formats. Sometimes it could be like an audio message from you. Sometimes it could be a quote or a definition or an article that, links to whatever you want to teach them that day or whatever they're supposed to do. I don't know, like I'm playing around here.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic because this was one of my big question marks. Like, I have all this content and I also have, literally thousands of examples of content and I can point to why it works and why it doesn't. So I have all this. It's just everywhere and it's just completely unstructured. So I'm quite chaotic. So when I was thinking, okay, how do I then turn this into these structured emails? I hadn't considered having like a repeatable structure, which is definitely the way to go. And teach, show, do feels like that hits the transformation, which is really what we're trying to get people to do. We're trying to help them understand. We're showing them a literal example. And then the really important part is they're actually doing it. Yeah. They're going and they're practicing and they're getting in those reps.
Yeah, exactly. And then on the weekend is the reflect bit where they kind of reflect on how the week went, whether they posted, whether they didn't post. We can give them prompts, like how did it make them feel? And I know that we share that philosophy on focus more on the process than on the numbers. So I wouldn't necessarily ask like, oh, how many likes did you get? How many did it? Because I don't think that's not what we're trying to do here. We're not promising like quick growth and high engagement rates, but it's more helping people get out of their heads into, okay, I feel comfortable posting, right? So that's going to be our metric kind of.
Yes, I love that. And that will be such helpful feedback. I wonder if we could even have like on Beehive where we would be sending these, you can do polls. And I'd be curious, like the confidence poll, how it changes from like week 1 to week 2. So maybe we could send that on like a Sunday, like reflect back so that we have some information of how people are, where people are falling off, if they're like, where they're making leaps.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. There was something interesting that I read on the website that you put out, which is, going from, or like posting as corporate beige to feral. I thought it was really funny and cool. And I like how I would think about it, and what I would ask you to think about is, what do you mean when you say corporate beige? Or, what does a corporate beige post look like versus one that has a real embodied take on? Because that will, and the reason why that will be important is because then we'll know how to design the exercises so that they're serving that specific goal of, okay, this is what you don't want, this is what you want, and this is how you get to it. Does that make sense?
Yes, makes total sense. I think corporate beige, we all know, as in if you've spent any time on LinkedIn at all, it's the post that you go straight past. It's the post that plays within the parameters of what you think you should do. And it is often the post that isn't very honest. It's just like up here, surface level, probably follows one of those very specific LinkedIn templates, which everyone is now using and is making everyone sound exactly the same, which I actually think is the biggest waste of time. Like, what a waste of your precious time to sound like 100,000 other people on a feed. And so if we go to the feral end, and I'm not saying everyone wants to go to feral, maybe some people listening are like, I'm ready for the feral. I think the elements that make that up are story, being able to, like my best posts, 100% of the time are a story. There's some kind of story element in there. And so there's an element then also of personal. So it's coming from you. It is something only you can say. It's your experience, your knowledge, your expertise, your intersections. It's coming from your corner of the world, your perspective, right? Your point of view. And I think two things that I tell people when they're really stuck is, number one is to be more honest. So people will often have the seed of a really good idea, but they hide it behind they're worried about like the perception or whatever the fear might be, and that holds them back from actually reaching the people who need to see it. So, and I'm not saying you have to bare your soul and tell everyone you don't have to overshare, but there's often elements where if I see a post, I'm like, what does that look like if it was 20% more honest? And then when you do that, that is when people read it and say, oh my God, like Millie is in my head, or she's saying that quiet part out loud, or I've been thinking that, but I didn't have the language for it. Like that is when you're saying what I guarantee other people are thinking. And the second thing I tell people is to think less. My gosh, how people overthink on what they're publishing and what they're posting, and they're spending hours and hours crafting this perfect post. Think less. You will get better with time. It's not about having the perfect post. It really isn't. It's about getting your reps in. And if two people see it, who cares? Because the real value of publishing isn't that people are going to see it. That's a cool byproduct. It's that you're clarifying your own thinking. And when you clarify your own thinking, that helps you get a job, that helps you negotiate for a higher salary, it helps you become a speaker, whatever those things, those goals are that you want. This process of working through what you think, why you think it, what you've learned, is something like that known own tone framework came because I was in the mud of figuring out how to do this.
Yeah, and I think I told you that recently on Slack you wrote to someone shared what they wanted to post on LinkedIn, and then you said, that sounds really cool, but how would you say it if you were talking to a friend? Because it would sound different. Okay, so what I wrote down is story and personal. So what we did with this kind of, let's say our outcome is to get someone from posting as a corporate beige to feral. That's what we would do with every outcome. So we would take it and like specifically break it into, okay, when you say I want people to have more confidence, what does that look like? And what kind of activities are we going to give them to do so that by the end they can say, okay, yeah, I'm now more confident. When we say we want them to, new language, talking about what they're great at. Okay, so this is kind of how I think about it. I take each of the outcomes and then we break them down into series of tangible steps, activities, like something that's not abstract, but that you can really trace back to that outcome and see, okay, yeah, so if I take a series of these steps or do a series of these activities, my chances of achieving that outcome are higher. Obviously we can't guarantee that everybody will 200% get to the outcome, but we can design it in a way that we facilitate that process and support it and make it like really easy and clear. I think what I see with a lot of people who step into the design, anything like a workshop or a course, the more knowledge they have, the more, and you kind of mentioned it as well, the more complex it gets, because there's this notion of if I give you everything, you will know everything. And it does not work like that, especially if you're a beginner and if you've never done it. Like, so I'm always like simplify, clarify, distill, and, make it as easy and as clear as possible and as simple for people. And then, we can always build another course where it's like more complex or da-da-da. But yeah, that's how I would approach the learning outcomes and also maybe have you think about it.
I love that. And I think like it's easy to say, let's clarify, simplify, distill. But I think that's a real craft or it's a skill in and of itself. So if you were advising me on like, how do I do that? Basically, I want to do that. I want to get there. How do I think about actually doing that?
I like to say to people, and this is again simple, but think about it as if you were explaining it to a 6-year-old. So just start there. And you already used it, but in a different way. Like, don't overthink it. Don't overthink it and explain it in a very simple way. And then ask yourself, okay, what did I do or what would I do to get to that step? And what resources would I use to help me get there? So, I don't know, like can you give me like a specific example of, let's say, an email that we would send out or ask on a day, and then we can kind of break that down. Maybe that would be easier for both of us.
So, an example of one of the 21-day
Yeah.
emails. Okay, so I think one of the days, what I would love for people to focus on is, oh, see, immediately, I, I, I have so, I'm in that weird stage of having so much to say that I'm like, wait, what is it? I've got all this knowledge, and then I'm like, what is one day of that? That's what I'm not clear on.
Okay, let's take 1 week then. So we start with the known. Let's think about it as if, like, what's the purpose of known? We want to help them to figure out what they're known for, right? Let's say that's the
Yeah.
goal. Okay. So one day could be, list the things that you have been doing in the past 3 to 6 months. I don't know. Does that help?
Got it. Yeah. Okay. So it might be something like in the last month of when you've been at work, tell me a story about a time that you solved a problem in like an unexpected way, or tell me a time when you said screw it and you shot your shot. What happened when you pitched yourself forward? Or tell me about a time, this is probably the later in the weeks, but that like something when you failed or like something went completely differently to how you thought.
Yeah. So what we would do then is, so this is a prompt. This is an ask that we have for them. And then what we would do is you would share your own personal story or an example of, when I was doing this, this is what happened and blah, blah, blah. And then we would, like, the teach bit would be, here's why this is important. And here's how
Mm,
and why this fits into the whole picture. And then maybe you'd
mm,
think of, oh, I had a great conversation with someone in the generalist world on this topic. Go and listen to that because it will help
mm.
you understand. And so this, like, let's say that's the resource that fits into the teach, show, do picture, which it sets them up to be more successful when they actually have to do it themselves.
Yes, love that. I think another example might be like one of my most popular posts this year was when I started writing this book and I got 20,000 words in, and then I read it back after having a bit of a break and I hated it and I started again. And this time I went from, instead of doing a non-fiction, which everyone else does, I went to this mad like parable fictional story, and that really resonated with people. And then I would love then, I think it's such a smart idea to then reference, like we have a few GW podcasts about failure, for example, or about like how to pivot. So using, like this is the thing, we have all these resources and it's just pointing people to them at the right time.
Exactly, exactly. I built for the purposes of this meeting, I built like a little, like in Notion, database, like a table
Hmm.
where we could, I listed all the days in column one, and then you have teach, show, do, reflect, so that we can kind of start slowly building it out. So what would the teach bit,
Oh,
look like on day
yeah.
one? And then we can link the resources because, and I think that's always smart. Like, you have such a wealth of resources in your database. Why not pull from it to, help build this knowledge base, practice base, and equip people, because they're not just getting it's not just the email series. What they're also getting is access to this wealth of resources, which I think is really cool,
Mm.
kind of curated for them in one place as part of this challenge, which I think is another value add to this mini course.
That's a great idea to do it as a database. My head, the chaoticness in me was like, oh, I'll just start writing the emails. And I was thinking of more because I'm also have the writing brain. So I immediately went to the writing. But what I really need is someone like you to tell me, no, think of the whole system, the whole like experience. And if I could just see it on a database, then I can also see where the gaps are. I could be
Yeah,
like, okay, what have I missed here? So that's fantastic
cool.
to have a database.
Yeah, that's how my brain works. I need the I need
Great.
the system.
Between us, we'll get there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love it. I don't know. Do you have any questions? What is like, is there any ambiguity on your end?
So let me speak it back to you, what my next steps would be, which honestly, I feel we've been recording for 38 minutes and my clarity from like when we started this call to now is I'm like, oh, I think I know what I need to do. So what I would do from here is I would probably work from the database. The database would be like the single source of truth. And now that we have this teach, show, do kind of format, I would spend some time going over my past posts and past things that I've put out there, looking for examples that I can include and looking, I think I would actually start with the examples. I would start with like why this worked or like why I would want to highlight or showcase this one. And I also want to point out, I don't plan on just doing my post. I really want to like amplify other people and other
Hmm.
people's work in this. So it's not just going to be like the Millie show. And I actually have like on LinkedIn and Insta, I have like bookmark after bookmark of posts that have worked. So in each of them, I would be able to speak to why. So I think my next step would be to populate that database, particularly with the example. And then from there, I can say why this worked or what the teaching lesson is. And then I think I would go to the exercise. Does that
Yeah.
flow sound right?
Absolutely. And I mean, it's what matters is that it sounds good to you because you're the content
Mm.
creator. But yeah, it makes sense to me. And something you said, I think it's I don't know if people know this. I do this because I learned it from Anna, but like bookmark post that you like. It's such and then, you get is inspired of how you could
Yes.
do it. So that's a nice teach, show, do moment as well
Yeah.
because I don't think everybody knows this.
Absolutely. And I think there's also something that we could have as a running thing throughout the challenge where we could have like a shared
Oh
hashtag
yeah.
where it's like POV challenge and then maybe one of the do, it could be like you published yourself, but then part of the do is you go and find someone else who's published that day and you go and comment or give them some feedback like and it's as part of like amplifying platforming connecting through doing. I think I would add that in.
Yeah, I mean, there's like we didn't go into those kinds of details of like the community almost as a support. Like I see the community bit as a like a cradle around the structure. It's like the thing that
Hmm.
holds everything together and that's woven throughout all of the activities, all of the weeks in some
Yeah.
way, shape, or form. And I had another idea of maybe also building in Notion like a daily tracker, like a very simple, did I post? Check.
Ooh.
How did it feel? Or
Love that.
I'm making this up. What did I learn? Blah.
Yeah.
But something like
Yeah.
super simple, and maybe also because I'm that kind of like I like to track my, mood, sleep, outreach, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But something that's very just easy and that we could come up with, what those fields would look like. But I see it as another, it's most like a support mechanism, or like a daily ritual. So you go to that space. Yeah, that's the word.
Eva, I wonder like you have worked with so many creators and course creators and people who have made really successful products. And I wonder is there a couple of like standout things that you have seen in every single time it's a really successful not just launch but like an effective program. What are some of those like patterns?
So one of them I mentioned, and that's distilling and making sure you're curating. And I would say like what's must have and what's a nice to have. Because I've seen
Mm,
courses that are just that slam people with resources, and then you're like, well, what am I supposed to do with all of
hmm.
that? And are you actually expecting me to read through all of this? Like my yoga teacher, I love him. He's an academic, but he recently sent us 3 books on Tantra that each have 500 pages. And I'm like, well, I'm never going to read that. I'm sorry, but I am just not. So, and that's why I think the learning outcomes as the guiding stars of like, what are we actually trying to achieve here? And every time we're like, oh, this might be fun to add, You go back and say, okay, but does this help me achieve what the goal that I've set for myself? If yes, then this goes. If no, let's add it as a bonus resource. Let's add it as a nice to have,
Mm,
let's find a different way, but let's like facilitate this cognitive clarity that and not overwhelm that people need to have. So I would say that successful courses watch out not to create that cognitive overwhelm, and they are built for tired professionals, adults who don't
mm,
have a wealth of time, but who do have little pockets of time, and they're there because they want to be there. So, use that time in a smart way. And I would
mm.
also say that and I think we're building for that, this back and forth feedback of like, how are you finding this and what's happening with you? So the course can always be alive and it can iterate, because I
Yeah,
think the learning should be in the service of the people who are taking it. And,
totally.
it's in the service of the individual, not the other way around. And I also think
Hmm.
that often gets forgotten because, knowledge and knowledge. Yeah, but not really. Like I said, learning for learning's sake as adults, I'm not a big fan of that.
And would you typically share the learning outcomes with people?
Yeah. It's this is what you'll be able to do differently. This is what you'll it's that transformation. Like, how will this impact your behavior or your thinking about something? That's how I
Hmm.
see learning, as a transformational tool to help people think about things differently or do things differently. But basically it's a behavior change, that you want to
Mm.
help someone. I'm missing a verb, but that you want someone to have. So I would
Yeah.
definitely, we could say by the end of week one, you will, da 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 da. Da. By the end of week two, you will, and then we can have those three as the big ones. We will have a clarified, confident, embodied point of view. You will have new language and you will have new friends. And I think those three are actually perfect. My recommendation is 3 to 5. You can't have 10 learning
Mm-hmm.
outcomes. That's another very common mistake that I see. And again, it comes from that, oh, I want to give people everything. Sure, but our brains don't work like that. We're not machines, and we can just take in and process and be expected to use that in an embodied way. So
I love that. And the funny thing is, like, I feel like if I was to take this course now, even having been in the depths of this for like 3 or 4 years, I would learn from it and I could take it again and I could take it again because we're not a static product, right? If we look at ourselves as a product, I'm not the static, I'm not the finished, it's still evolving. So I think I'll take that with me as well. This has been amazing, Eva. I really appreciate you taking the time. And I will keep you updated with that database. And if people are listening, we publish it. And I hope you join us on the POV challenge. And I will also, if we do publish it, I will be sharing all of Eva's links and everything so that you can get in touch with her.
yep. Thanks, Millie. I hope this was useful for you, because it was a little bit of combo of like, oh, are you getting what you need from it? And are people who are listening getting, something out of it? So let's see.
Totally. And we have no idea, right? It's an experiment. So if you're listening, give us feedback. Let us know, share this if this was helpful. And if you want more episodes like this, there is 800 generalists in the GW community. I'm sure I could learn from many of them. It could be an interesting new format you might have kicked off.
Yeah, and I hope everybody joins us in the challenge because I think it's going to be cool.
Yay! All right. Thank you so much.